You are watching Dime a Dozen on MTGO Academy featuring Jason Moore.
Hi folks, and welcome to another installment of Dime a Dozen. This is Jason Moore here with MTGOacademy.com, and we're going to be spotlighting a deck in the two-man queues here in the classic Pauper format. This deck is called Boros Kitty. You can also call it, Boros Metal, Boros Midrange. Some people have even called it the value menu because it's so resource-based, card advantage-based. And let's get into it. So this is an attrition deck. This is a deck that can go hit for hit with just about anything aggressive in the format, anything that's trying to be fast. This deck really wants to outlast those kind of situations, and it wants to end up gaining incremental advantage through drawing cards, through playing creatures that have added value attached, and by removing stuff. It wins ultimately with the evasive threats and a pretty heavy suite of burn, including Galvanic Blast. So this is a list that I took from one of the 8-man queues. It took first place. I played it in a match or two, and then I started switching some things out just to test for this very set of videos. So the main changes that I made, as far as I can remember, is I took one copy of, should I go over the whole deck first? Probably. I'll do that and then I'll talk about the changes. So let's start with the land base. We're playing only 20 lands, but this deck also has 7 turn 2 card draw spells, and it has Core Skyfisher also to make up for missed land drops. And it has Boros Garrison, which kind of counts as hitting your land drop in a way. Speaking of which, we're playing 3 of those, so that gets us an additional source of each color, and it helps by bouncing Kabira Crossroads to gain extra life. We've got 4 copies of Ancient Den and 4 copies of Great Furnace. That's to add to our Metalcraft count, and it also can work with Glinthawk and Kuldotha Rebirth. However, those are not ideal unless you have an abundance of lands. We've got 4 Kabira Crossroads here, which is a synergistic life gain piece. It works with Core Skyfisher and the Garrisons. And then we've got 2 plains, a single copy of Forgotten Cave, which adds to our red sources, but also can be bounced back to the hand to cycle, or can just be used to cycle initially. And then 2 mountains to round things out. So, as with many decks that follow this sort of tradition, you're not really maxed out on creatures. You don't have a lot of threats, but you draw into additional ones later. And all of these ones produce some kind of value. So we've got 4 Glinthawk. Works best with Prophetic Prism and Ichor Wellspring because it's going to draw us additional copies. We've got 4 Core Skyfisher, does the same thing, but also buys back our lands, our missionaries, and our sanctifiers. 4 Lone Missionary, a synergistic life gain part of the deck, and 3 Core Sanctifiers. So keep in mind that this can blow up our Ichor Wellsprings as well. So this can read as a 4-mana 2/3 that draws a card also. That's not that bad. That's pretty close to Muldrifter numbers. Outside of that, we do have 2 copies of Faithless Looting, which I'm not sure about. I got to be a little controversial here. I'm not a fan of this card. I don't think this card is really all that good, especially if you don't have a lot of graveyard interaction. This card actually puts you down on cards as opposed to being at parity or being up on cards. So I don't really know that it fits very well in this deck. The reason I think it is in the deck is because we play so much removal that against some matchups we're going to have a lot of dead cards, and we want to just kind of sift through and discard those away. And then we've got 3 Kuldotha Rebirth. Again, this also works really good with Ichor Wellspring. So a lot of stuff here from the Scars of Mirrodin block, and you see a lot of the interactions that maybe were prominent in Limited or Block Constructed coming to the forefront of this Pauper deck. Now, I've separated out the other artifacts and the removal suite. So just to go over that quickly, we have a Singleton Bone Splitter to beef up some of our guys, 3 copies of Ichor Wellspring, and 4 copies of Prophetic Prism, and this fixes our colors. It gives us about 14 sources minimum of each. I'm not going to count it out now. I know I think the red is 14 sources. Then as far as our removal, we've got 4 copies of Galvanic Blast. The Metalcraft is not really turned on until the late game, usually. So at that point, it's very good. But until then, you have to keep it in mind that this is not like playing Affinity in terms of using your Gal Blasts. And we have 4 Bolts. Again, the direct damage here is pretty relevant because we don't have a lot of threats. These are double duty as creature removal and direct damage. And then Celestial Flare, I've actually brought in a second copy from the sideboard into the main deck because I wanted more ways to interact with Hexproof. And this has been okay so far. The jury's still out on this. And 3 copies of Journey to Nowhere to round things out. So the changes I made from the main deck is I cut a copy of Sylvok Lifestaff and brought in a 3rd Lone Missionary. I feel that Missionary is just going to do a better job of gaining life than Lifestaff will. It does cut one of our artifacts, but I still think it's a better choice. And then I cut a copy of Oblivion Ring to bring in that second Celestial Flare. I don't think there's anything that Oblivion Ring hits that our creature removal or our sanctifiers won't hit. So that was my reasoning as far as that goes. I think those are the only changes I've made to this main deck. In the sideboard, we had a freed up slot from moving the Celestial Flare. So I brought in a 3rd Pyroblast, and I cut a 3rd copy of Electrickery for a 4th Pyroblast. I think those are the main changes. There may have been a copy of Stone Rain in here, and I decided to go up to just Molten Rains because I wasn't sure why there was a 2-1 split. So I hope you guys enjoy these matches. They are going to be certainly interesting. And keep in mind, this is pretty much my first time piloting this deck in a competitive, hardcore kind of scenario. But I think we fared pretty well. So at any rate, thanks for watching, and I'm looking forward to your guys' feedback on all the action. So we'll talk to you guys later, and thanks again.